What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 24 of Godzillatober, Godzilla 2000. Fun fact about this movie is that this is actually the very first Japanese Godzilla film that I got to see in the theaters. This film is actually the last Japanese Godzilla film that got a theatrical release in North America until Shin Gojira, many years later. Let's go.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Jared Fearing.
I'm a lifelong Godzilla fan and a big fan of Halloween.
And nothing says Halloween like monster movies.
So this year, for the month of October,
we're going to review every single Godzilla movie, from Gojira all the way to Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire.
So join me this month for a new video every single day and see if I go insane in the process. Let's get to it. Now we've entered into what is known as the Millennium Era of films, beginning with this one and ending with Godzilla Final Wars. It's a very short stretch of films, but they were pumping out one a year, and I think you can see why a little bit in the production quality, but we'll talk about those as we go through the films. After what was perceived as a failure, even though, as we talked about in our last film, it was financially successful, Godzilla 98, the rights went back to Toho and they immediately went back to creating rubber suit Godzillas. So even though we had a CGI and practical effect hybrid in the 98 movie, here we're back pretty much to fully the rubber suit. There are a few CGI sequences and they're absolutely terrible. One of the biggest issues with this film, but I think it's a problem throughout all of the Millennium Era films, is that they've realized they can do Godzilla films more cheaply with CGI, and I think that brings the quality down significantly. Suitmation and miniature construction is like a real art. And when they start replacing those things with green screen and CGI, it looks drastically worse, in my opinion, and takes a lot away from the production. This movie, unfortunately, is loaded with CGI, and it's bad. Like bad CGI, like made for TV bad. There's one scene of Godzilla swimming under the water, and it's the first time we actually see a fully CG Japanese Godzilla, and it looks like a PS2 cutscene. I take it back, PlayStation 2 had Final Fantasy X. This doesn't even look that good. And the Godzilla design for this film is not entirely what we get throughout the Millennium Era, but it's kind of similar to a few of the suits, and I hate this design. This looks like a spiky version of Frog Godzilla that we got in King Kong vs. Godzilla back in '62. They tried to give it like a radically new look with the spiky dorsal fins and kind of spiky scales coming off it, but to me it makes it look more fake than ever. Like, imagine putting this side by side with the Heisei era suit and being like, oh yes, this is definitely a better design. A big problem I have with this design is what they're doing with the jaw and face. The eyes don't seem to have any life in them at all. They look completely like doll eyes almost, and the jaw is clearly like a segmented piece. You can see there's like a line in the suit that kind of looks like a double chin, but it's actually just like the hinge for the jaw. And the jaw is so like wavy looking. Something about it is just really off. I hate this design. I honestly hate this design. The two main characters are a father-daughter team, and they're kind of living out their Japanese trope of being like the daughter is really in the mother role and kind of takes care of the dad. That's shown up in some other Japanese animes and other movies. I can't think of anything specifically, but I know that I've seen it before, for sure in anime. And as characters, they kind of bore the shit out of me. Every main character in this movie has like no real motivation and just kind of drones on, and I hate the human story. It's terrible, honestly. Those two don't really have any sort of an arc. They're just kind of researching Godzilla. Nothing specific. They're just like, don't kill Godzilla, we should research him. Cool. Give me something new. The military are researching a uncovered meteor that they found in the ocean, and they plan to raise it up using airlifting mechanisms. The interesting thing about the meteor angle is that in Godzilla vs. Mothra: Battle for the Earth, they talk about the Earth being threatened by a meteor in 1999. I know these are not canonically connected, but I do like to kind of think that maybe they had the foresight to be like, oh yes, we'll release a film in 1999 and there'll be a meteor and that's going to be the problem. And the meteor turns out to actually be basically a fossilized spaceship. And as they're bringing it out of the ocean, it rises straight out on its own. And then it seems to be following the sun, and at one point goes vertical. And the stuff with the meteor is probably the most interesting in the movie. The stuff with the villain, I guess I should say, because the Orga stuff is pretty interesting. But the meteor itself kind of reminds me of the Denis Villeneuve movie Arrival. And that's a big compliment, I guess. At one point, they make a nuclear power plant shut down the reactors, and they do it instantly. And I was like, no way it can happen that fast. And I Googled it, and it turns out they have something called a scram mechanism that basically shuts down reactors in less than a second. That's pretty cool. I learned that while researching this. But to fully shut down a reactor safely takes several hours. But that's okay. It turns out that the quick failsafe is totally fine for Godzilla attacks, I would assume. The things you learn. After a Godzilla encounter, they do the footprints on the beach thing that we just saw in Godzilla 98, except they do kind of make it look a little bit better here. That is one of the few compliments I will give this movie, but they definitely just ripped that straight from the previous American one, that our character can kind of be inside the footprint researching Godzilla in that way. They talk about Godzilla's recovery ability, and they basically say that he's Wolverine, but we already kind of knew that. Still cool to hear. The spaceship is kind of stealing data from around itself and learning from the internet, and that's cool. It's definitely a 2000s era take on Godzilla involving computers and networks and stuff. This was like a time of technological transformation for the world, so it's interesting to look back on now, considering how prevalent technology is today, to see that this was kind of at like the advent of the home network, and this thing is kind of stealing all the information about Godzilla out there. And they actually determine that the alien is trying to research terraforming the Earth, and so it has to make the Earth in a certain condition for itself, which makes sense, but also they figure that out literally from just like click-clacking on a laptop that is not wired to anything. And I don't think wireless internet at that time, it probably wasn't much of a thing at all. In the year 2000, I bet you only like the top level computers in the world would have had like a wireless network at that point. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe my computer history is off, but they're in like a down building and the main character click-clacks on a laptop and he's like, oh, this is exactly why the alien is here. The villain Orga has a very cool design, I will say that. He looks great in his rubber suit form. Orga is a very different design than creatures we've seen in the past. A lot more Final Fantasy-like, highly detailed. And Orga looks really inspired by the aliens from Invaders from Mars, the Tobe Hooper remake. That's one of my favorite B horror movies, by the way, Invaders from Mars. And it's hard for me to think that Orga did not take inspiration from those, especially because they have like a gun in their shoulders and he has like a gun in their shoulders. I don't know. It could be coincidence, but I have a feeling that these are... The aliens from Invaders from Mars are probably a big influence on Orga's design. Anyway, Orga and Godzilla have a battle that's okay. There's too much CGI, and the CGI is horrible throughout this whole movie. I can't tell you how much I hate it. It really, really ruins basically every action sequence in this movie. Godzilla kills Orga, and then there's a military guy that's kind of the antagonist of our human protagonist, and he just sacrifices himself for no reason. He stands there and lets Godzilla kill him for literally no reason. He watches Godzilla walking up, and then he yells at Godzilla, and Godzilla crushes him with his hand. It's a really bizarre, dumb scene that, it's like, why did he sacrifice himself to Godzilla? I don't know. Maybe some of these things come across better in the Japanese version. When it comes to this movie, I'm just going to come out and say it. I think this is probably the second worst Godzilla film in the entire franchise. I don't like pretty much anything about it aside from like the design of Orga, and what a terrible step forward after Godzilla 98. I don't understand how people ever could compare like this movie and be like, oh yes, classic Godzilla, and then 98 and be like, oh, not my Godzilla. It's like, how are you even comparing these movies? Anyways, I don't recommend this. I don't like Godzilla 2000. It's a bore to get through. The action is horrible. It's really oversaturated with terrible CGI. Skip this one entirely. Let's move forward in the Millennium series. Up next is Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. And I'm interested to revisit this one because it's been a few years since I've seen it. But this is the first kind of flying insect villain we've seen that is not Batra or Mothra, so it's an interesting take for sure. I think if I remember correctly, it involves some like black holes and stuff like that. I'm gonna be looking forward to revisiting it. So I will see you next time for Godzilla vs. Megaguirus.